tick tock. You know what makes that sound?
For whom the TikTok tolls. I have a question about TikTok.
Yeah. What is it?
No, it's a very specific question. Not a general question like that. It's a very specific question.
Uh-huh.
And I need you to answer.
Okay.
In sworn testimony.
Okay. You're gonna shout over me or bully me, or can I just answer the question?
I just want you to answer the question.
Okay.
Isn't it true that the Chinese Communist Party uses TikTok to access the American internet to commit genocide?
No, that's not true.
It is true. Shut up. Next question.
Phew, I thought you were going to ask me, have you now ever been a member of the Chinese Communist
We're
Party?
way past that. We're way past that.
It's amazing how such a non-issue was, at least in the mainstream news cycle, kind of the issue in the US last week.
Yeah. I think I'm joking about that. I mean, that to some extent, that was the tone of the at least in Congress, that was the tone of some of the questioning. Check this out.
Only if does TikTok access the home Wi-Fi network?
Only if the user turns on the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry, I may not understand the.
So if I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to access the network to get connections to the internet, if that's the question.
Is it possible then that it could access other devices on that home Wi-Fi network?
Congressman, we do not do anything that is beyond any industry norms. I believe the answer to your question is no. It could be technical. Let me get back to you.
Okay, I'd appreciate it if you could answer that.
Could it get access to the average American's refrigerator, for example, and figure out what's inside it?
I love it when the Congress politicians become informed, like just that morning when they're briefed by the staffers as to how things might work.
They have no idea what they're talking about.
And then they expose their complete ignorance. They have no brief. They shouldn't be there at all asking questions.
Yeah.
I have more on that.
Here's another, there's another one. Throw that one up, Scotty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Chu, I got to hand it to you. You've actually done something that in the last 3 to 4 years has not happened, except for the exception of maybe Vladimir Putin. You have unified Republicans and Democrats.
Good job.
And if only for a day, we're actually unified because we have serious concerns. Does TikTok support good? I mean, is TikTok a platform for good? Just yes or no?
I believe yes.
Okay. Does TikTok support freedom of speech?
Yes, it's one of the commitments I've given this committee.
Do you personally support the First Amendment?
Congressman, I'm here to talk about
As the CEO of TikTok?
I'm here to talk about TikTok.
As the CEO of TikTok, do you support
TikTok supports freedom of speech.
Thank you. Does TikTok support genocide?
Again, Congressman, I'm here to talk about TikTok.
Does TikTok support genocide? Does TikTok?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, but I'm here to talk about
reclaiming my time.
Is TikTok evil? No, just a yes or no answer will do.
just yes or no.
Let's play the BBC one as well. This went on and on, I think, for 3 days.
Yeah.
Couldn't find this version on Twitter, but hopefully it'll play for us. This is directly from the BBC's website. Even like the British media were like, okay, this is a complete own goal. This is a PR disaster. Like the US Congress people are bullying this guy,
You have regular contact with Chinese Communist Party Secretary, Mr. Zhang Fuping, who is your boss at ByteDance, correct?
No.
That TikTok and ByteDance share legal teams. You confirmed this, correct?
Our general counsel is an American lawyer, veteran of Microsoft.
Also, my colleague, Representative Latta, confirmed that your parent company, ByteDance, currently can access user data. Yes?
We have to be more specific.
Yes.
You've actually done something that in the last 3 to 4 years
has
not happened, except for the exception of maybe Vladimir Putin. You have unified Republicans and Democrats.
If I have a TikTok app on my phone and my phone is on my home Wi-Fi network, does TikTok access that network?
It will have to to access the network, to get connections to the internet, if that's the question.
Is it possible then that it could access other devices on that home
Sorry,
Wi-Fi
we saw this one.
Congressman, we
It's
do
worth
not
seeing
do
again.
anything
One
that
last
is
one.
beyond
This
any
one's
industry
definitely
norms.
just
The Chinese Communist Party is
another
engaged
one.
in psychological warfare through TikTok to deliberately influence U.S. children.
There are more than 150 million Americans who love our platform, and we know we have a responsibility to protect them.
Oh my God.
Okay, and for me, the cream of the crop, actually, because some of them, like Miss Piggy there, she's probably new to Congress.
Yeah.
She's not exactly informed about the world, right? But this guy you would expect better from. This is Dan Crenshaw, senator for Texas or representative, senator, I think. And this guy is like World Economic Forum member. He gets attacked, sideswiped big time as a rhino in the US because he's so, Mr. Cosmopolitan, much more liberal wing of the Republican Party. Okay,
Right.
Let's see what he grilled him over.
In other words, ByteDance and also your TikTok employees that live in China, they must cooperate with Chinese intelligence whenever they are called upon. And if they are called upon, they're bound to secrecy. That would include you. So, Mr. Chu, if the CCP tells ByteDance to turn over all data that TikTok has collected inside the U.S., even within Project Texas, do they have to do so, according to Chinese law?
Congressman, first, I'm Singaporean.
That's fine.
That's fine. That's irrelevant to what I was trying to say. Anyway,
That had to be said because all week long, everyone assumed he's got slanty eyes. He's the CEO of TikTok. He's
yeah,
Chinese.
yeah.
The man's name is Xu Zichu. He's Singaporean, as he pointed out. He holds a U.S. passport because he's married to an American woman.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he speaks English, probably. It's nothing to do with China or the CCP, but this batshittery just goes on and on all week long. It's embarrassing. For me, this is like, we wondered, could they go any worse than Chinese spy balloons?
Mm.
That's worse. That is really like cringing. Like the BBC says, this psychological bullying. This is, too far, People who are generally supportive of the Western order and, down on Putin and the war in Ukraine are looking at this going, this is an own goal. Like, what was the point of that?
Well, the point of it was, it seems to be the point of it was to increase the, ongoing anti-Chinese rhetoric in advance of some kind of a conflict with China. Consider back in the 1990s how the American, and particularly Americans, but Western populations were put through a process of indoctrination, anti-Arab, anti-Muslim
Right.
indoctrination leading up to 9/11 and the subsequent war on Islamic terrorism. So it seemed to be either consciously known or just an instinct among the political class that the population have to be prepared for a conflict with, significant conflict with another major country.
At first, you need to dehumanize the opponent
Right.
as much as you can.
In the minds of your home population.
So there is a logic to this, as farcical as that all is, along with the balloons. There is a system-wide logic to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you could be on something. Like last weekend, actually, it was breaking news at the time that Bashar al-Assad had flown to the UAE to meet Mohammed bin Zalman, MBZ, as he's known. He's arguably the big chief of the Middle East, even more than MBS of Saudi Arabia. He's kind of the mentor, even though it's a smaller country, they're richer. Anyway, so that was an opening of that just indicated big time for me that the normalization of the Middle East, that chapter is coming to a close, of democratizing the Middle East, or rearranging the energy spigot of the world, because the US is backing out of that in a systematic way. And here's something that supports that. Well, two data points. One, Saudi Arabia this week reopened an embassy with Syria So again, normalization of ties in the Middle East. But on the Western front, there's this. The U.S. military is redeploying material from the Middle East to Eastern Europe with Ukraine in mind, I guess, but more importantly to the Pacific with China in mind. This was reported in the Wall Street Journal. So it's farcical, but there's a logic to it. Quote down there: the imperative is to get the most suitable aircraft to the Pacific for the higher threat challenges. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, what's the threat? The threat is anybody, and particularly, obviously, Russia and China, challenging, what's the word? Challenging US leadership. Now, this is something, I mean, it's kind of, while it's difficult, like I've mentioned many times, dealing with the kind of clown shoes bullshit that's going on around the world, and the amount, the deluge of lies that and misinformation, disinformation is coming out of official sources about pretty much everything, right? Over, really reached a new high point over the past number of years in terms of the lies and disinformation. If you thought that, authorities lie and manipulate the population in the past, well, geez, you really should have had your eyes opened over the past number of years if you've been paying attention. But back in the day, when we've been doing this for quite a long time, and the one lament I always had, and it was, I knew there was no way to kind of to get any satisfaction from it, but the lament I had repeatedly after looking at investigating and writing about it for so long was that I just wish these people in positions of authority and politicians, etc., would just be honest. They use these manipulative weasel words and half truths and quarter truths and complete lies and stuff that don't match with what they're doing. They do something that looks like what it is, but then they tell you they're doing sometimes exactly the opposite. They tell you that freedom is, or war is freedom, war is peace, and slavery is freedom, and all that kind of stuff. And it was just, I just wish they would just be honest. Just make your words match what you're doing. Because it's really annoying for me to have to unpick all that for other people.
We got a few wisps of it with Trump, where he's like,
right. Well, that's the thing.
We went to Iraq. Why didn't we get the oil?
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But recently it seems like as it becomes more stressful and more difficult for the US to cover up under a banner of freedom and democracy, what it's always been doing around the world, it's having to become more explicit about what it is actually doing and has been doing. And of course, it's not just that it's doing this now; it has been doing this for a very long time. This is Kirby at the White House. And it's a, relatively, historically speaking, a rare bit of transparency from him. Just have a listen there.
Thank you. Real quick, just real quick, what's the level of concern about the growing influence of China around the world then?
Well, certainly mindful that China has tried to expand their influence all around the world, Middle East, in Africa, in Latin America. They can speak to their foreign policy goals should they wish to. I can only speak to ours. And our goals are not about countering or being a block or an obstacle. There's no effort to contain here. It's about advancing what President Biden believes are the appropriate foreign policy goals for this country, for the American people, and for the best interests of our allies and partners. And again, I'll go back to what I said before. No other nation in the world, none, has a network of alliances and partnerships that the United States does, has as many friends around the world as the United States does, who are interested in pursuing the same goals.
Like
Secretary
Micronesia.
Austin just a week or so ago held the 10th Ukraine Defense Contact Group, more than 50 nations, again more than 50 nations at each and every one. And those are voluntary participation
By the way,
events. It's not like we're browbeating people to show up.
Not at all, no.
Agree to contribute to Ukraine.
Never happened.
That's the power of American convenient
We don't blow up.
leadership. And
We
you
don't blow
see
up
that power
pipelines to
out of
get
either
people to
Russia
support
or
Ukraine.
China. These are two countries who do not have that same network of friends and partners. And one of the reasons why that relation. Sorry, that their relation. He got me all. He got me. No, he got me all lathered up.
Freedom.
You got me all lathered up now. But one of the reasons why you're seeing that tightening relationship is because they recognize that they don't have that strong foundation of international support for what they're trying to do, which is basically challenge American leadership around the world.
All right, last question.
There you go.
Okay, but
So one thing they don't, the reason they're acting this way, China and Russia, is because they realize they don't have that network, right, of friendship and cooperation that America has. So he's talking about Russia, a country with the largest available natural resources in the world. That basically is, as John McCain said, the gas station of the world. Although it's not, but it was true to a certain extent. And China, the country with by far the largest population and basically the factory of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Those two countries are uniting. And he thinks that's insignificant. He thinks that's just like people are just desperate. Those two are just desperate to push back against us because we have all these friends. We've got like Micronesia, we've got Europe, and we have to blow up their pipelines now and again to get them to fall in line. But they're our friends, obviously, right? And then we've got like who else? We've got New Zealand, we've got Australia, a giant desert of a country with 20 million people. They're our best friends, and we're going to get them to fight against China for us. And then we've got a couple of countries in Asia around China who we're going to throw at China as well. We give them an attaboy and see what happens. So that's our wonderful alliance compared to these Russians and Chinese who are kind of insignificant and they're desperate and they're flailing. And it's like, you got me all lathered up there, Neil. You know what I mean?
It's hard to quibble, but you just truthified what he falsely said. You wished he had said what you just said.
No, but he's at least saying the thing he's saying there is challenging US.
He lied on every point, but what you have is that finally a US government spokesman has been forced to come to the point of issuing a denial to each in the broad strokes and in some of the details. Yeah. That's where you've got them being at their. It's the most truthful they've ever been because they're having to acknowledge and having to issue a denial. And what's the famous thing that people say? The maxim, it's never true until they're forced to issue a denial.
Yeah. I mean, I thought the important point was that he said that what they're trying to do is challenge US leadership, which is a massive sin, right? Anytime anybody challenges for leadership of anything, that is just the lowest of the low, right? Anybody who does that should be condemned, in the severest terms, because it's ridiculous. Isn't it true? Like in life in general, that nobody ever is allowed to challenge anybody else for leadership of anything, right? That's true. No, well, that's what John Kirby is essentially saying. It's like everybody knows that there's no way anybody should ever dare have the temerity to challenge U.S. leadership. It's ridiculous. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? These people need to be taught a lesson, right? Challenging. Nobody challenges me. Who do they think they are? In fact, somebody did a summation of the same press conference, and they just kind of broke it down into. You just play it there, Scotty. Broke it down into some short bites.
U.S. leadership around the world. U.S. leadership around the world. America's increasing leadership around the world. U.S. leadership around the world. American leadership. The power of American convening leadership. American leadership around the world.
He said all that in that same press conference that many times. They're not repeats. They're separate.
Kirby also said last week, talking to Mika Brzezinski, we won't bother playing it, but he was basically downplaying. The reason he's talking about this at all, of course, because Xi of China was in Moscow for 2 days last week. Mm-hmm. He was downplaying this. He was asked, about the growing relationship between Russia and China. He downplayed it again. He said, look, this is merely a marriage of convenience. Mm-hmm. Temporary, fleeting. I've got me wondering, do they really think that? I don't think so. I think their actions will speak a greater truth than the words they're saying. And their actions are, in one example we just saw from the Wall Street Journal, they're redeploying war material in a big way from the Middle East. They're pivoting to Asia, as Obama first announced in 2014.
If it's just a marriage of convenience, then what's there to worry about, right? Yeah. Why would you get concerned about it? Why are you redeploying any weapons anywhere? Why are you talking about America having to go to war with China in the next couple of years, et cetera, if it's just a marriage of convenience, right? Why are they crapping their pants about this love-in between Putin and Xi, in Moscow? Why is that so? Why is that such a concern? Why do you keep talking about Ukraine then? Why are you getting worried about Ukraine? Why are you warning and threatening China that it better not provide any weapons to Russia for Ukraine. If it's all just convenience, it's all superficial. It's hollow.
While spending the entire week telling everyone, like Kirby was doing, we're still number one, baby. We're still number one.
Yeah.
Don't let anyone think otherwise.
If you keep saying it enough, it might come true. You know, that's usually the way it goes, right? If you just keep saying something, then eventually you might.
China's not allowed to send weapons to Ukraine, but Jesus, the EU's announced another $2 billion worth of. They're gonna send shells.
Well, 1 million shells. You know how long that'll last. At least
current
at the fire rate that Russia has been using, it'll last 7 weeks.
Nuts.
Russia's firing 20,000 shells per day, so 140,000 per week.
Nuts.
140,000 artillery shells per week. Ukraine a lot less because they're having trouble matching that. But if they wanted to match the amount of Russian firepower in Ukraine with 1 million shells, it'll last Ukraine 7 weeks. And of course, they're going to take. How long is it going to take to produce 1 million shells? You're talking like 2 years down the line. Every single.
They claim they'll have them within a year.
Yeah, they claim. Right. They claim, and yeah.
Let's come back to let's as Saki would say, let's circle back to Ukraine.
Circle back there.
While we're on China. Xi was in Moscow. This is old hat now, but it's happened since our last show. It was just 2 days, not 3, but whatever. 14 statements, protocols, memoranda, and agreements on everything from joint scientific research to military cooperation to trade. One such agreement. This is a small fry one, but think about the implications of this. The governments of Moscow and Beijing agreed to cooperate in producing a joint television programming broadcaster between the main Russian one, VGTRK, and China Media Group. That was one of the memoranda of cooperation. In addition, state news agencies TASS and Xinhua also agreed to set up a new joint platform. That could be huge. I mean, it's just words for now, but think of the inroads in an information sense that RT and Sputnik made with their tiny budgets to the point that they just have to be banned. We can't, they were like, shit, we can't compete with them. The most viewed news outlet online. Okay, let's just ban them. Now you're going to have that kind of informational content with Chinese money behind it and satellites and comm systems. They won't be able to ban. When that comes to fruition, it's a new information. You can't flood the zone anymore or just censor it. They'll try, but that'll fail on the face of it. This thing about it being fleeting and merely a marriage of convenience, I don't know what more Putin and Xi could have done to make it any clearer how freaking serious they are about, quote, a deep and comprehensive strategic partnership. Quote from RT, as part of his toast, the Russian president quoted from the I Ching to say that the Russian and Chinese people have a, quote, common soul and can overcome any obstacle with their joint strength.
That's pretty, it's not very superficial.
Multiple deals were announced, but of course we don't know what else was said behind closed doors. Somehow, though, I don't know, by accident or whatever, there's a hot mic, and as they're departing in that fond farewell, and Trump noted this, he saw it. It wasn't reported on the news, but it was shared online. We don't play it. Have you seen it?
What?
The clip of them saying goodbye and Xi saying to Putin,
yeah, go ahead, yeah,
that we change, we're undergoing now changes that haven't been seen in 100 years. And the West knows this. We saw the Telegraph headline last week that from their perspective, again, it's been 100 years since we, the Western order, have been challenged like this.
Doesn't have the subs.
There's no subs, but it's provided in caps above there. Xi to Putin, change is coming that hasn't happened in 100 years, and we are driving this change together.
Putin, I agree.
Trump isn't allowed on MSN, but he is, interviewed by Newsmax and other sources. Do you want to hear his comments on it?
On the meeting?
On the meeting, and specifically that he thought that was significant. He's like, people, like this is this is really bad for us. But he didn't just say it was bad in the same way, I suppose, that Kirby would rail against it. He wanted to draw attention to it, you know, to explain to Americans the significance of it. Because remember, Kirby at the official level, at the rhetoric level, was telling Americans he's poo-pooing it. This isn't serious. Trump says, no, this is serious. Have a listen.
But I thought the scene in Moscow yesterday where Putin and Xi are talking, and they're talking about how there's a big reset like there hasn't been in 100 years. I thought that was an incredible statement. Got very little press because the news is fake, but it was a terrible, terrible statement when they were talking together on a hot mic. Just think of this. Russia and China and Iran have now gotten together and formed an alliance. That would be impossible. You know, Russia and China are, by nature, it's very hard for them to get together. We have forced them together because of really stupid energy policy. And now you add Iran, and now you can add Saudi Arabia, too, because all happened on the Biden watch.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
We've lost so much stature in the world.
Robert, very importantly, to think that Russia...
So he's basically right. Things are snowballing. It's happening fast. He's just taking note. Obviously, he's saying it's bad from our point of view. And he's correct. Objectively, it is. But
well, listen to what he said. Trump said, I think it's just yesterday or
at a rally.
Maybe yesterday, Saturday. Yeah, have a listen here.
Either the deep state destroys America or we destroy the deep state. That's the way it's got to be. We're at a very pivotal point in our country. Either we descend into a lawless abyss of open borders, rampant killings, super hyperinflation, which is what we have right now and not coming down, and festering corruption, or we evict Joe Biden and the Democrats from the White House and we make America great again.
He's not quitting,
He also said at that one that our enemy is neither Russia nor China, but they're right here at home. They're high-level politicians and bureaucrats.
Yeah, well, you can see how what he said in that interview jives with what he said there. That I mean, the problem for America standing in the world that is caused by American policies forcing Russia and China together and upending the safe the safe political organization of the Middle East, as it has been up until recently, with Saudi Arabia in America's pocket,
the petrodollar,
basically upending all of that has been caused by the deep state. That's as a result of their policies, and it poses a direct threat to America's standing in the world, and therefore to do anything about that right now, not just in terms of those foreign policy issues, but also in terms of domestic policy issues, like you mentioned, immigration, all that kind of stuff. They have to get rid of that cabal in Washington D.C. that is running the whole thing into the ground. But just I can't let this one go. Actually, this is on that that meeting. This is Trump. What do you call it? What's it called?
A political rally.
Yeah. This is Trump arriving.
Put our hands together and let's make some noise for our favorite president, Donald.
He's going to parachute out.
That's not Donald Trump coming. That's Tom Cruise. Oh no, sorry, it's Maverick. Maverick is in that plane with Donald Trump. He's come to take back America. It's that's conservative America right there.
If he could, he would freeze the US in the 1980s. You know?
Or transport it back then. Yeah, that was funny. It's just.
But ultimately, Trump is also wrong. This is not just that the Biden administration, or even the last 10 years, say, of the deep state working behind Trump while he was president.
Well, it goes back a long time.
It goes back a long time. Let's check this out. This is 1997. Arguably, what happened in Moscow last week is the culmination, or rather the coming to fruition of a 25-year plan. This is CNN reporting in 1997 of the then president of China flying into Moscow for a 2-day summit in which they sign a pact. The leaders of Russia and China in 1997 signed a joint declaration pledging to seek a multipolar world with no one country dominating the international order. Down the bottom there, Yeltsin says about it, we want the world order to be multipolar, to have several focal points. These will form the basis of a new world order.
Yeah.
That was Yeltsin, the pro-Clinton,
What is that,
pro-US.
25 years ago? Wow.
1997.
It took a long time coming to fruition, like, you know. But of course, it was pushed back all the way from the Americans. The Americans, arguably, you can say the Americans knew that back then. When, like, we don't remember that, right? Nobody at the time paid any attention to that. But people in Washington D.C. paid attention to that back then, and they knew about it before then. That idea of the U.S. losing its hegemony in the world and no longer being the world's policeman and the top dog was a major problem in the 1990s, was seen as a major upcoming problem that they had to do something about. 9/11 arguably was that new Pearl Harbor that they said in the PNAC document that they needed, a galvanizing event in order to mobilize the American population psychologically, emotionally, and the political class to get the military out into strategic areas of the world, notably the Middle East and Afghanistan.
Forward operating bases.
And into Asia in order to secure the realm, right? To secure American hegemony going forward. And they were successful for, a lot of the 25 years since then. But these other countries, obviously at the time, China and Russia, who were planning something else that the Americans were pushing back against by taking launching this war on terror, this war for American global hegemony, for securing it. The Americans, the Russians and the Chinese continued on with their plan. Basically, it was made more difficult, and the Americans, like I said, pushed back against it. But ultimately, there was no way that the Americans were ever going to be able to, lock it in forever. And it's that lack of lack of common sense, lack of reality-based thinking,
lack of acceptance
of reality, that is causing all of the problems that we have in the world today. Basically, it's the refusal to accept reality and the changing reality, and the fact that reality is always going to change, and you can't always remain top dog and handing out orders to everybody in a world such as ours, where you have other countries who have as much right, if not more right, than you do to dictate terms in the world.
So it was an epic summit. Now Pepe Escobar reckons it buries Pax Americana. We shall see about that, but he may be correct about something about the timing of it, because the opening day was March 19th. He arrived, actually. 19th was the anniversary of the launch of the Iraq War, 20th anniversary. Maybe there's that. It also coincided, I mentioned it last week, it coincided with the second Russia-Africa Parliamentary Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Putin actually stepped away from working meetings with Xi to give a speech at that event on the Monday.
Mm-hmm.
There were 40 delegations from Africa in Moscow all last week. Xi did not attend. I thought he might, but he didn't. But Putin did. Russia announced it was writing off another 20 billion in debt to Africa, pledged all the grain, fuel, and fertilizer, and I'm quoting Putin here, that the Europeans stole last year, that was from Ukraine. We are going to instead give you the same. We're going to fulfill those contracts free of charge from Russia. I mean, that was epic in itself. He said something else, added about that ties it all together. He's talking about financing and the use of the yuan in Eurasian, Russia and its neighbors, and trade with the whole of Africa. So,
отношения с Россией. Подчеркну, наша страна всегда уделяла и будет уделять первостепенное внимание сотрудничеству с африканскими государствами. Не не будет преувеличением сказать, что это один из неизменных приоритетов российской внешней политики. Со времен героической борьбы народов Африки за свою независимость общеизвестно, насколько значимую поддержку оказал в свое время Советский Союз народам Африки в борьбе против колониализма, расизма и апартеида. Как помог многим африканским государствам обрести и защитить свой суверенитет. Последовательно поддерживал становление государственности, укрепление обороноспособности, создание основ национальной экономики, подготовки кадров. Символом такого сотрудничества в свое время стало сооружение советскими специалистами крупнейшей в Африке Асуанской гидроэлектростанции. И линии на поддержку и помощь континенту продолжает следовать.
We'll end that there. That's not actually the clip I had in mind where he talks about
the
trade being settled in domestic currencies. But
Right.
anyway,
But
it was tied with what he said with, I didn't know this, but at this point, just in the last 2 years, 2/3 of trade, inter-country trade between Russia and China is in local currencies, ruble and won. And there, he was stressed in that speech, apparently there's a clip there where he wants that to happen with Africa as well. Like now, not let's wait and see. Now's the time, guys.
Yeah, but it'll all be to no avail, Neil, because there's a just 15 hours ago, basically, this happened. Kamala Harris's Africa trip. Can the US charm offensive woo the continent from China? Of course it can. With Kamala Harris at the helm, how could it not?
America's first black president. I mean, vice president. Wait, is she black? No.
She's
Hang on a second. What about
she's in
Barack
the game.
Obama?
You send him, yeah. Yeah, and the other thing about Africa is in the G20 later this year is in South Africa. And South Africa is a signee to the ICC, International Criminal Court. So
if Putin goes
to the G20, which he probably will and should, then the South Africans theoretically would be required to arrest him and hand him over to The Hague. Do you think that's going to happen?
No chance.
Probably not, for lots of different reasons. Not least of which is the fact that South Africa has a good relationship with Russia and probably wouldn't want to create do anything to sour that. But also there's a history. I think it happened before in South Africa. There was someone else who was wanted by the ICC. It's quite a long time ago, and by the time I can't remember who it was. Someone, maybe it was an African. From another African country. Anyway,
Russia funded and armed the ANC, for God's sake.
Right.
They don't forget that.
Yeah, and also the Brits supported apartheid. The Dutch supported apartheid.
Something atrocious happened. Just actually, Z was midair on his way to Moscow, and this happened on the eve of his visit in the Central African Republic. Gunmen descended on a mine in the CAR and executed in cold blood 9 Chinese engineers who were working on a gold mine there. If you scroll down to Coalition, do a first search and find for Coalition. This was initially reported as being the work of there's kind of a civil war going on in the CAR, and one of the rebel groups is called the Coalition of Patriots for Change, or CPC. However, the rebel coalition, initially blamed by some for the attack, put out a statement later in the day. Without providing evidence, it accused Russian mercenaries from the Wagner group of being behind the violence. So somebody did something there, apparently in a message or in some attempt to sour Xi's meeting because he was about to land in Moscow. That's the kind of shit that goes on. Like, that mine had just opened 3 days earlier. This is a country where, until this mine opened by the Chinese, only French companies and interests had owned gold mines in the CAR since the scramble for Africa in the 19th century. So a 3-day-old first time a Chinese and a non-European, non-Western interest and then there's an atrocity there.
Mm-hmm.
Dodgy.
Yeah. Exactly, and I wonder who's carrying out those atrocities. Well, I mean, Matt Gaetz, this week in Congress was talking to the leader of the U.S. military's Africa Command about what the U.S. military is doing in Africa, what it gets up to, and whether or not.
Well, they're wooing like Kamala, no?
Well, I mean, they've been there for a long time,
Right.
But I don't think the military is necessarily wooing. They're doing a different kind of wooing, let's say, not at the political level. So Matt Gaetz wants to know if the U.S. military's Africa Command, he's asked them if the American government shares the core values with certain leaders, military leaders in Africa that the U.S. has been supporting. So you have a listen. I won't listen to all of it, but.
General Langley, I have constituents that have been scattered across Africa on train and equip missions. So just ballpark, in the last decade, how many Africans has the United States military trained and equipped?
Congressman, I don't have that figure. I can get that figure for you.
Ballpark, just, how many?
Congressman, it would be a wild guess right now.
Seems like something we should know, right?
Over the years, we have trained a substantial number, especially in the Gulf of Guinea states, but including
like more than 10,000.
It is more than 10,000.
More than 50,000.
I'd say we're reaching around 50,000
okay.
at least.
And 50, what percentage of the people we've trained end up participating in insurrections or coups against their own government?
Very small number, Congressman. Very small number.
So what percentage do you think?
I'd say probably less than 1%.
But it does happen.
The IMET program is in force, and we've pushed a significant number through our schools across the.
Yeah, and what data sets do you track to arrive at the conclusion that less than 1% of the roughly 50,000 that we've trained have participated in coups? Because it'd be like about 500, about 1% of 50,000.
Congressman, you may have that information. I don't at this time, but I know.
Well, I know there are some, right? Like go ahead and throw up that image. This is Colonel Mamade Doumbouya, and this is a photo of him. Did we train and equip him in Guinea?
By name, I cannot identify that.
Well, that guy in the middle with the big red hat, Colonel Mamade Doumbouya. That's him with a bunch of U.S. service members outside of our embassy. And just months after this photo was taken in 2021, he led a coup in Guinea and threw out the leader. Does that concern you?
Congressman, core values is what we start off with in IMET programs.
Do we share core values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Core values. I will repeat that. Core values.
Say it again. Just keep saying core values.
Do we share those values with Colonel Doumbouya?
Absolutely. In our curriculum.
He led a coup.
We do.
That's a very telling
yeah, we do.
answer. In Burkina Faso, did we share core values with the leader that we trained there who led a coup?
It's in our curriculum. We stress core values.
Curriculum?
Request
What's in our curriculum?
civilian-led governance.
Wait, hold on. Is leading coups in our curriculum?
Absolutely not.
So
civilian-led.
My question is, do we share core values with the coup leader in Burkina Faso, who we trained?
Holistically, we teach core values with a respect for civilian governance, apolitical,
but
and
just
that's
sometimes it doesn't stick.
Across,
all right, we can leave it there. Anyway.
Gotta love Gates. 30, 50, 40, 50 years ago would have been the progressive left congressman doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, now the only one who bothers to actually broach any of these topics, like he did with Syria 2 weeks ago, is a MAGA Republican representative.
Right.
Arden Trumper. He was at the Trump rally this week, bigging up. Maybe he was in Florida. That's why he co-attended.
Speaking of core values, American core values, and something I think, we didn't miss it at the time, but I missed this specific interview. This is Senator Murphy. What's his first name? I don't know his first name. anyway, he's current U.S. senator, and here he's talking about. Go up to the top, actually. Scroll up a little bit. Yeah, go up to the top one. This is on C-SPAN, February 2014, around the time the Maidan protests, or Maidan protests in Ukraine, 2014. And this is him. He had just become a senator in 2013. So here he is, and he's talking about that event and U.S. policy towards Ukraine. Just have a listen.
So what is the best way the U.S. can help in this situation?
Well, I think the United States' strong voice in support of the peaceful protest movement is a big part of the story as to why there is an opportunity now for the Ukrainian people to get what they want. Early on, the United States said that that peace should be observed in that square. We came down hard on Yanukovych when he violated that peace, when he sent his forces into the square repeatedly to clear it, ultimately over the course of the last week resulting in dozens of people killed. And I think it was our role, including sanctions and threats of sanctions, that forced, in part, Yanukovych from office. Now, the question is, what can we do to support this new government? There's going to be a lot of talk about an assistance package.
Right, so our role was significant in ousting Yanukovych. Right. This is the coup in Ukraine, 2014, that led to the war in Ukraine today. And
although he implied that the snipers who killed all those protesters were they weren't Yanukovych.
No, but well, it doesn't matter. But go back to it and go to the next one. Go ahead.
Well, I really don't think that this is a proxy fight between the United States and Russia. I know a lot of people want to make this into sort of the new chapter in a new Cold War, but it's not. This is really about supporting one of the biggest, most important countries in the Eurasian region, be able to determine for themselves what their future is. And it looks to people like this is the United States and Russia once again fighting, maybe not in military terms, but on economic terms in a country that we both care about. But really, ultimately, I think this is about us supporting the wishes of Ukraine. And, there is a U.S. interest here. We are in the middle of negotiating a new trade agreement with Europe. To my state, it's enormously important. We do 40% of our trade in Connecticut with Europe. If Ukraine is part of the European Union and thus is part of this new trade agreement with the United States, that could result in billions of dollars in new economic opportunities for the U.S. So we do have an economic interest in the Ukraine being part of the European Union. We shouldn't be shy about making clear that interest.
Yeah, indeed.
And pulling Ukraine away from Russia through a violent coup that the U.S. supported. Let's go to the next one.
For more money, for me.
I will admit to you that I have not been involved in what's happening in Venezuela over the last week, because I've been focused as the chairman of the Europe subcommittee on Ukraine. But with respect to Ukraine, we have not sat on the sidelines. We have been very much involved. Members of the Senate who have been there, members of the State Department who have been on the square. The Obama administration passed sanctions. The Senate was prepared to pass its own set of sanctions. And as I said, I really think that the clear position of the United States has in part been what has helped lead to this change in regime. So I know that there is merit in the claim that the United States sort of has these principles and then we selectively apply them. We get involved in certain places and then we don't get involved in other places. But I think if ultimately this is a peaceful transition to a new government in Ukraine, it'll be the United States on the streets of Ukraine who will be seen as a great friend in helping make that transition happen.
Buddy is from the claim.
It was a coup, dude. Go to the next one.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
All right. My concern of being a child of the Cold War is always a threat from, the East. And I was concerned with how this moving forward could lead to some type of global conflict. Whenever we seem to have these elections that are monitored or the United States is involved or Europe's involved, it seems to eventually end with some type of violence. I was concerned with that violence escalating on a global scale between Russia and the European Union, or with the United States' involvement in potential conflict between those two superpowers.
Got that one.
There certainly is some concern about what Russia is going to do over the course of the next week or month. I think it's irresponsible to talk about the potential for Russia to move some kind of offensive force into the Crimea, which is the
which happened
the
about
coastal
2 weeks
region
later
of Ukraine that has a Russian military base and a lot of the important ports. That would be a fundamental grave mistake on behalf of the Russians, and I think they know that would essentially lead to a descent to madness. So I don't worry that this is going to result in any kind of military confrontation between the U.S. and Europe and Russia.
10 years later.
And then there's just one more below it's worth listening to as well. I want to segue into something else.
Buddy is from McLean, Virginia. Independent line for Senator Chris Murphy.
Hi, I just have a few points, and thank you for allowing me to call C-SPAN, by the way. Hello?
You're on, go ahead.
Oh, hi. So I'll just have 3 quick points, and then I'll take the answers off the air. The first point is, isn't it true that Yanukovych was elected for the first time in 2010 for 1 5-year term? That elections were scheduled for 2015.
Exactly.
The second point is, why is it okay for foreign ministers from other countries to show up during protest movements, let's say in Ukraine, like the foreign ministers of Poland and Germany, and support the protesters against the current government there? Wouldn't it be something similar to the foreign ministers of, let's say, Mexico and Canada showing up during the Occupy Wall Street movement and saying, yes, we agree that your government is corrupt? And the third point is, why isn't the West and America talking about the fact that a large or significant portion of the Ukrainian opposition right now is made up of far-right politicians, including from the party Svoboda, which openly is fascist and xenophobic, and they say that they don't want to join the EU because they consider the EU to be a bunch of gays and Jews, just as well as they say that they don't want to join the imperialist Moscow regime.
Let me take all those very quickly, one at a time. You're right. Yanukovych was elected, and I mentioned this before. I understand the difficult position here, which is that Yanukovych was elected, and we are not in the business of encouraging rebellions and revolutions on the streets against elected leaders, because we ultimately think that elections, as you mentioned, are the place in which you should settle your differences. The issue here is that Yanukovych lost his legitimacy to govern when he used force to try to break up these protests, and the United States didn't go on to that square in any meaningful way until the president tried to break up the peaceful protests. That's why Senator McCain and I went, and we certainly got a lot of grief from people asking why 2 U.S. senators are going to the square to support a protest movement against an elected government. We did that because we think that there were human rights and civil rights that were violated there, and we've always stood up for that concept. And again, I think that answers your second question as to why you had foreign ministers and foreign leaders who were on that square. It was because we're standing up for the idea that people should be able to lodge protests against their government. You are right that there is an element of the opposition that has some real radical ideas, and there is an element of anti-Semitism that was present on that square. I will tell you from having been there, if there were 500,000 people there, maybe a couple thousand of them represented that viewpoint. And so by and large, this movement completely rejects those radical and prejudicial ideas, and I have confidence that this new government is going to be inclusive and going to be tolerant, and it will be part of our job, I think, as members of the Foreign Relations Committee, to make sure that those kind of more radical elements don't have a seat at the middle of the table as the coalition government goes forward.
It'll be part of their job to decide the next government, right? And also the reason they were there, the reason that him and McCain went was because of, defending human rights, right?
Right.
But had nothing to do with what he said just previously, which was that it was economically very interesting for them that the Ukraine would be removed from Russia's sphere of influence and become part of the European Union. So now, what is it? Is it the money or is it the human rights? Is there not some kind of a contrast between those two? And the other thing he said was that, Yanukovych was elected in 2010 and he was up for re-election in 2015. And why didn't you just wait for a year? Why did you support this kind of undemocratic coup 1 year in advance of elections where he could have been voted out of power if that was the will of the people? And he said, well, the answer to that is that he lost his legitimacy to rule because he had used force with the police force to break up those protests. Now have a look at this.
Oh la la.
I'm beating the crap out of people on the ground. Now, in case you're wondering,
awful what those Russian police are doing to those poor Muscovites.
That's not from Ukraine in 2014. That's not the evidence that he said. It's not the evidence of police in Ukraine in 2014 in Kiev using violence to break up a protest that led to the delegitimization of Yanukovych and therefore his, being sanctioned, his overthrow being sanctioned by the US. That's just a few days ago in Paris, where the French government, Macron, is using violence via the police to break up protesters, but that's fine. There's no human rights violations there. There's no need for an attaboy and cookies in any square in Paris. So, I don't know.
As far as I know,
tell me.
2 governments on the earth have condemned it. The Russian government through Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova, and the Iranian foreign minister, who issued a statement saying, "We call on the French government to respect human rights and avoid resorting to force against the people of its own country who are pursuing their demands peacefully."
Mm-hmm.
I bet they enjoyed that.
Just one thing we didn't mention on Putin, on the ICC, and being arrested for, what was his war crime?
Abducting children.
Abducting children from a war zone, right? Abducting them, forcibly abducting them, removing them to Russia, right? Now, I mean, who does that? That's never happened before, right?
Only barbaric, authoritarian, non-democratic, non-Western countries.
Okay, let's have a look. You ever hear this?
Operation Baby Lift. God, they didn't actually call it that, did they?
Was the name given to the mass evacuation of children from South Vietnam to the United States and other Western countries, Australia, France, West Germany, and Canada at the end of the Vietnam War.
Huh.
By the final American flight out of South Vietnam, over 3,300 infants and children had been airlifted, although the actual number has been variously reported.
Along with Operation New Life. Wow, they sure were advertising it. Over 110,000 refugees were evacuated.
So 3,300 infants during the Vietnam
War.
War.
That's different.
It is how?
That's different because America's an exceptional nation.
Okay, well, that explains everything then.
And the exception rules.
Okay. So, yep. Everything is one rule for me and another rule for you. That's how America rules the world.
The IMF has issued another $16 billion loan to Ukraine this week. It's just, I don't know how that even going to work. By my accounts, they've given in just the last 10 years, 70 billion in loans. It's funny money, of course, because it comes with conditionalities. You must perform this way and or you must sell your assets on the cheap to these Western interests, just total plunder. More of the same, nothing new there. But there is a new development, though, on the Ukraine front at the big level. In addition to the European Union saying, "Oh, we're going to crank up factories and send them 1 million shells," the British government says, "Oh, we can go one better. We're going to send depleted uranium shells." Russia said it sees this as, quote, introducing a nuclear component into the war and would respond accordingly. I think Putin's announcement Thursday that Russia is now going to position nuclear weapons in Belarus this summer from July, for the first time since 1996, when they pulled out their nukes, is Russia's kind of response to this for now. The UK government reaction to this is interesting. I'll put this up. Their reaction to Putin's response about a nuclear component being introduced. Imagine the hubris, the freaking... Well, it's same as the American attitude, we're exceptional. What? Headline BBC, Ukraine war, UK defends sending DU shells after Putin warning. So I think it's the first few paragraphs. The UK Ministry of Defence confirmed it would provide Kyiv the armor-piercing rounds, but insisted they had a low radiation risk. Depleted uranium is, quote, a standard component and has nothing to do with nuclear weapons,
Right.
the MOD said. Quote, the British Army has used depleted uranium in its armor-piercing shells for decades. Russia knows this. This is deliberately trying to disinform. Hang on a second, you shitheads. Between you and the Americans, you dropped 800 tons of DU on Iraq. And although
With
you've
well-documented
effects
on the local population, i.e. cancer rates going through the roof,
birth defects. There's papers up the wazoo. I have 4 here. I won't even show them. It's well known. I mean, really, the gall to say that after Iraq turned the place into a wasteland. I fear, though, that it does speak to another Russian statement from this week, where the headline snapshot of it was that the West doesn't care if they destroy Ukraine in the process.
No.
Destroy. I mean, make it uninhabitable. All the better, because then Russia won't get it.
Right, and they can rebuild.
Chris Murphy in 2014 wanted to get Ukraine for plunder, and they've got that to some extent to funny money loans and structural conditionalities over the last 10 years. But when it comes down to it, the card they always had in their back pocket was that Murphy didn't articulate and didn't expect, it seems, in 2014, was that if Russia does fight back, fine then, we'll just take a great big dump on the place and they won't get it either. Or they'll have to spend an awful lot of money cleaning it up. It's just horrifying. And do these people they've no idea how they sound, but only the dumb or the completely unaware, not asleep, cannot make the connection. The gall to say, DU, that's normal, and the risk of radiation is low. I mean,
I came across something interesting by Christine Lagarde, who's the president of the European Central Bank, has been for quite a while. Just put up that article.
Formerly IMF,
yeah. She's not the ECB, and she's talking about the inflation and the banking issues over the past few weeks with the banks in the US and stuff, and Swiss Bank and Credit Suisse, and just go down. You might have to go down and do continue reading to see the paragraph. Continue reading, and then Lagarde. Let me see the euro area. That one there. Just that paragraph. The euro. She says the euro area has suffered a large terms of trade loss owing to rising energy prices. Now, rising energy prices are directly as a result of their sanctions against Russia, cutting off Russian gas and oil to Europe, spiking the price of energy prices. So she says that the euro area has suffered a large terms of trade loss as a result of their own policies, the cost of which must ultimately be shared between firms and workers. It is important that there is a fair burden sharing between them, with both accepting that they cannot fully recover the income that the euro area has paid to the rest of the world and the ensuing loss of output, i.e. cannot fully recover. So there's been a loss of actual industrial output to the rest of the world, primarily to America, but to other countries as well. But, it was part of America's plan, the American Biden government's plan, basically, in blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipelines and pushing for this war in Ukraine to hobble or to reduce the output of the European economy in favor of America. And here she's saying she's saying that's actually what happened, and the fact that it cannot be recovered. There's a loss of output that is not coming back, more or less ever. So anyway, it's just in there in her speech, and it's just it's economic speech type thing, you know what I mean? It's like an economic language, and
arcane.
But she's actually saying, what she's literally saying is that we've basically screwed ourselves over here by siding with America over this war with Ukraine that America provoked. Part of it was to screw over Russia, but obviously part of the plan was to screw over us, Europe, the European economies, by America, and to transfer industrial output from the European Union to America, and that's all fine because it's just business, right?
Yeah, there's another clip of her touting her solution to all things maybe we need to do a separate show topic on it to be better informed. But this whole thing about the push for central banks having a centralized digital currency, I presume that means shifting away completely from paper money at all. It's all digital banking, all central bank controlled. Well, it already is, I suppose, already. But the new thing was that she was, I think she got caught out. She thought she was speaking to Zelensky, and she was speaking to those Russian pranksters who are pushing on her for some examples. I don't have the clip to hand, but she says at the moment, for example, you're limited in how much you can pay for a transaction with cash at, I don't know, 5,000 euros or something. We want to bring that way down. It'll become way down to the hundreds, you know. This is all like I think what I'm getting at, maybe we need to explore it more, but what I'm getting at, I think that she sees the only kind of viable solution for the sum of all these crises is because of the loss of output, less resources. As Macron said, we're no longer in the age of abundance. There's going to be less of everything. It's like musical chairs. We got to make it all fit in a much tighter environment.
Centralized economy.
They need to control currencies and therefore what people can and can't do. The limits
how much money they have, how much they spend. We got to stop inflation, right? The best way to stop inflation is to limit people from what people purchase, right? So as of now, you increase interest rates to try and stop people borrowing and spending money. But I mean, there's a far better way to do that, right? You just directly stop them spending money by reducing the amount of money that they actually have access to.
We downplayed, so to speak, for now, the risk of a financial kaflooey last week. But, you know, there's shit's happening. Is Deutsche Bank in trouble now?
Nah, it's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I mean, it's fine right now.
It's fine right now.
Yeah.
Both Biden and Schultz issued statements of reassurance this week. Oh boy, when they have to issue a denial, you should start to go, oh, okay, I'm not sure about that.
It's basically it's fine right now, and in the small print, terms and conditions apply. The fine state of the Western banking system may or may not remain fine.
Here's a real world
for the
effect.
Future.
Real world effect. Just last week, this is NBC News. Shit is happening, huh? I don't know what. This is just a drop in the ocean, probably, but it was enough of a newsworthy event for NBC to write a story about it. Headline: nearly $100 billion in deposits pulled from banks. Where? I'm not sure. I presume just in the US. Officials, I presume American, call system, quote, sound and resilient. And Biden's starting to he's being asked at every turn. Huh? He was in Ottawa last week for some powwow with that fascist Trudeau. And he was asked about, sir, something like, sir, should we be worried? This is his response. It's not reassuring. When Biden has to reassure you, you know, like, you got to wonder, how close are we?
How confident are you that the problem is contained? And if it spreads, what measures, such as guaranteeing more deposits, are you willing or not willing to take?
First of all, have you ever known Wall Street not in consternation? Number
what?
one. Look, I think we've done a pretty damn good job. People's savings are secure. And even those beyond the $250,000, the FDIC is guaranteeing them that the American taxpayer is not going to have to pay a penny.
Well, mine is secure. I don't know about yours.
Shape. What's going on in Europe isn't a direct consequence of what's happening in the United States. And what we would do is, if we find that there's more instability than appears, we'd be in a position to have the FDIC use the power it has to guarantee those loans above 250, like they did already. And so I think it's going to take a little while for things to just calm down. But I don't see anything that's on the horizon that's about to explode. But I do understand there's an unease about this. And these mid-sized banks have to be able to survive.
Actually, you know, something is on the horizon that's about to explode, you know. When Biden doesn't see anything on the horizon about to explode, there's probably something on the horizon about to explode.
You should get out of Dodge. People know that they're voting with the money.
Right.
The withdrawal of deposits.
Well, although $98 billion is a yeah, like you said, a drop.
I don't know, how big that is, but it was noteworthy. Someone noted and thought, we should write a story about that.
Want to do a quick thing on? We haven't talked about it in a while. COVID. It hasn't gone away.
What?
The COVID. Remember COVID?
No, doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, it's this thing that was going on there a few years ago, and it killed a load of people, and so did the government solution to it. Anyway, Australian government, if you just want to throw it up there, Australian government, Department of Health, it's been declassified effectively. It was produced in January 2021. It's the Department of Health is their Therapeutic Goods Administration, which basically means medicines administration. The Australian Department of Health, official government document released called Non-Clinical Evaluation Report of the Pfizer COVID-19 Vaccine. It's a fairly long document, and it's got a lot of sciencey type stuff in it. But John Campbell on YouTube, if you look him up, he's been on this COVID thing for quite a long time. He's had a change of heart in recent months about the whole situation and what actually went on and what's going on right now. And he's been focusing on the vaccines to a certain extent. And as most people know, there are side effects from the vaccines. That's attested to by everybody. But this report is interesting because part of it's still redacted. But what it does reveal is that in January 2021, the Australian government, and therefore most other governments, would have access to the same information, probably had the same report into the vaccines and their efficacy. Shows that they knew that, if you remember at the time, we were all told that the vaccines only stayed at the site of the injection. They didn't go any further. The mRNA, the kind of lipid nanoparticles that carried the RNA stayed at the site, and that's what it just, immunity was provoked at the site type thing. Well, in this report from January 2021, before Australia had actually rolled out the vaccine, before most countries had rolled out their vaccines, this study showed that it actually spread systemically throughout the entire body into all major organs. There's a long list in this study, or in this report, of all the different organs in the body and parts of the body where the vaccine actually spread to. So it was a big lie at the time. Was the only conclusion you can, when they had this information, knowing that it spread to all parts of the body, but officially everybody was told that it stayed at the site of injection. That was a lie. And what's the problem with it spreading to all parts of the body? Well, the problem is that the reason they tried to assure people that it stayed only at the site of injection was because it was, by anybody who has any sense, it was, it raised potential concerns, serious concerns, if it spread systemically throughout the body, which it did. And obviously, there's been so little actual official government. There's been behind the scenes studies and reports done on it that were not revealed. This is one that has been revealed, showing that they were concerned about these things, about it spreading systemically, and but they basically didn't look into it. How long it lasts, for example. Remember, you're told it breaks down in a couple of days and stuff. Well, in this report, it shows that they checked it after up to 48 hours, and then they just didn't check it any longer. It could have been, the lipid nanoparticles, how long it actually remained active within your body, i.e., because it's the RNA within the lipid nanoparticle, and that enters the cell and instructs the cell to make the spike protein on cells of your body. It basically turns the cells, and this is the problem. If it's spreading all around your body, then any cell within any part of your body, including your brain, including within your bone marrow, where most of your cells are actually produced, and where a lot of your immune cells are produced, it turns all of those cells into kind of hybrid versions, in a certain sense, of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. By forcing your cells, hijacking your cells to instruct them to produce the spike protein on the outside of your own cells. The spike protein that is normally on the outside of which is the antigen on the outside of the virus. Now your cells are producing that on the exterior of themselves, of their cells, which provokes an immune response. But the problem there is the obvious immediate go-to question is, well, won't that provoke, rather than it just creating that, causing your cells to produce that spike protein temporarily for a day or something like that, and just provoking this immune response, is that happening over a long period of time, and is it happening everywhere in your body? Because ultimately, whenever your cells are producing or being instructed by this mRNA technology to produce that spike protein on the outside of them, your own immune system sees them as hostile invaders and attacks them and often kills them. So basically, the question is, is it producing an autoimmune conditions? Is it possible that it could be producing autoimmune conditions by spreading all throughout your body and instructing many cells in different parts of your body to become enemies of your own body, to be seen as enemies of your own body? They knew this at the time, that's what was happening, and they knew that it was a concern, but they didn't bother looking into it and released the vaccine anyway. It's an experimental vaccine. And not only is it experimental, it's experimental in the context of them knowing that this particular experiment could well have serious negative health effects on the people who receive it, but we're not going to follow it up and look into the actual potential for that to happen because we just got to get the vaccine rolled out. So let's go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
So that's basically
such mindlessness.
That's where we are.
Campbell also had a little video on this preprint.
Mm.
Want to have a look at this one?
The preprint study, just showing the
I thought his response to it was hilarious.
This
We'll get to that in a minute.
This one pretty much shows, it's a preprint, but it shows it's a really well-researched study, and it shows a direct correlation between increased excess deaths and the number of people who received the vaccine.
This is just the URL for it, but people can download the PDF there at that link. The key part in the study says the interaction between vaccination uptake and time passed in months since the beginning of 2022 is strongly significant and implies that the mortality increases the higher the vaccination uptake. Specifically, it shows that a 1 percentage point increase in 2021 vaccination uptake is associated with an increase in 2022 monthly mortality by 0.1%. That's a tenth of a percent.
So 10%.
But that's
caused by a 10% increase in excess mortality caused by the vaccines, basically.
Well, to be clear, it's all-cause mortality. They saw a correlation. They couldn't say, and they didn't claim in the study. They said this is overall deaths, right, from anything. But they then go on to try to rule out as much as possible cofactors, but they still leave it as strongly significant.
Well, they also said that in 2021, in 2022, so 2022 all-cause excess all-cause mortality, in 2020 and 2021, and they compared the average to before
the 5-year average
beforehand, right? Yeah. Before 2020. But in 2020 and 2021, you had excess deaths as a result of COVID. Let's say that's what that's officially. So when you have a significant number of excess deaths, and historically in any one year, the following year you have much reduced deaths. Right. Because you've wiped it's the dry tinder, right? The British government statisticians who call people who are basically have one foot in the grave dry tinder. If this winter season they're not bumped off by a flu or a cold or something, they're definitely going next year. And when they go that next year, then you're going to have a reduced number the following year because you simply don't have as many vulnerable people to die.
So it fluctuates.
So in 2022, there should have been a significantly lower number of excess deaths compared to previous years, and even compared to not just to 2020 and 2021, the COVID years, but also lower than 2019 and 2018 because the people who were in those years who were kind of waiting to died in 2020 and 2021, and in 2022 you didn't have really that many people to slip this mortal coil. So but you did have in 2022 a significant increase in excess deaths. So what's it attributable to? What happened in 2020? What happened in 2021 leading into 2022?
Well, let us not say it. Let's do a John Campbell on it. Can we play the last minute of his video? Yeah. So we've just told you
what
Dr. Campbell's description
outlined.
Of this preprint. He says it's significant. That 10th of a percent correlation is statistically significant. He agrees with the research suggestion or conclusion. He acknowledges now that this is a preprint, which means it's not been peer reviewed. But the reason he's even bothered to discuss it at all is because, in his opinion, this kind of preprint will never make it
because of what it says,
because of the core claim,
not because of its methodology or because it's not sound, but because of the conclusion it draws based on solid science.
Yeah. So
that's how peer review works.
Having gone through the paper and quoted directly from it, this is what he says at the end of his short video.
So that's the end of this video. I've nothing more to say on that now. On a completely separate matter, I've been thinking of might go to the States and take up start playing basketball. Nothing drastic. I'd probably just start with semi-pro and then build up. But I've been looking at the terminology, and apparently you have something called a slam dunk in basketball, and this is literally a goal scored in the basket by putting the ball straight down into the loop with one's hand. So that's a slam dunk. The same points as a traditional basket, but it's a show of force, dominance, and skill. So a slam dunk is something that is completely convincing. As I say, nothing to do with this today's talk, but I'll need to use the correct terminology for when I'm playing basketball in the States. So do look out for me. I'm quite optimistic about it. But for now, thank you for watching.
You legend. Okay, that's all we have to say on the topic. If that's all he's saying, that's a mic drop. We can leave it there. But, you know, shit, others are saying it too. Look at this headline. I know this is not the Washington Post, but it's still a serious newspaper in the United States. Let's just look at the headline. This is last week. Not sure what new development they're basing this on, but we could have told you this in January 2020. Headline, Washington Times. Vaccines don't work. Masks don't work. Everything government told us about COVID-19 was wrong.
Well, it's nice to say I told you so, but it's not really that nice given what happened. Given what people missed out on.
We refer to it en passant, as they say, for comparison with the Maidan. But tell me now, a week later, with more intense riots and burning going on in France, do you have any more? What do you think?
In France?
Yeah, revolution?
Nah. Par for the course in France.
It's still just another Tuesday.
Yeah, it's another Tuesday. Couple of things.
Macron barely survived the no confidence vote, though.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, everything is in flux at this point. Everything is up in the air. I mean, they're all feeling it, especially in Western countries, and they're getting more and more desperate. They're doubling down on their reality denial, and that just means that there's going to be more chaos. They're going to be taking actions that are increasingly divorced from reality, and they're going to get a kickback from from reality, let's say, and also from the people that make up the reality-based community, let's say. This one is I just thought it was interesting. I know it's not that unusual. It happens quite a lot in America, but it's in rolling. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong one. Well, we'll just talk about that one for a second. That was going to be my next one. Elon Musk a week ago just tweeted that press@twitter.com now auto-responds with a poop emoji. That's just all you get. Press@twitter.com is for any journalists who want to ask him any questions or find out what's going on Twitter. They would send a tweet or their questions to press@twitter.com, and anytime any of them do that, it just automatically responds with a poop emoji. That's it. That's the only response they get. And then Vice did a story on it, and they said, we asked Twitter about hosting anti-Semitism, and it responded with a poop emoji. And it was anti-Semitic. The subheading is anti-Semitic tweets have more than doubled since Elon Musk took over the platform. A new study found its automated response wasn't a good look. So Vice are like, what about the anti-Semitism? Twitter, what are you doing, you fascist? And just like poop emoji. Anyway, back to what I was saying.
Arch troll, that guy.
Yeah. This one is rolling. What's it called? Rolling Fork. Pretty crazy. I know, like I said, it's not that unusual for the US, but it was.
Tornadoes.
Yeah, last night. It was like, have a look. It's just silent drone footage of it.
It's nuts. It's nuts to me that their houses are still all made of wood. Sorry, Americans, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I understand some of y'all can't afford it and so on, but
that's one factor. But
if you don't want to get smacked by a tornado,
you look at some of this footage and it's like their cars just tossed around, like not just cars, but semi trucks and shipping containers, like bent in half. and semis with their trailers tossed around in the air. So I'm not even sure if you're in the middle of that, any kind of
not even brick and mortar will
yeah, exactly. Look at that, 2 semi trucks.
Crazy.
2, like, I don't know if they were full or not, but like, you know, you could say they're definitely, you know, 10 tons more.
Crazy.
It's just a wasteland, like, in this relatively small community, but 26 people dead. Trees just shredded.
It's that time of the year, isn't it? Tornado Alley.
I suppose. Is it March?
March begins, yeah.
Right off the bat.
Can be earlier. It has been earlier some years.
Yeah.
Hard to say, you know. I used to pay pretty close attention to it, but then I looked up some stats, and you can get a few years in a row where it's mental, but then you can get a fairly quiet years, you know, both in the intensity of any individual outbreak and overall through the year.
Yeah.
Some years it's just really bad. It just scours everything. Wow.
Yeah, I think there's an image of a shot of the maybe we saw it already, did we? A shot of a shipping container just like bent around a pole or something like that, you know. It's like sheet metal from the roof of something. It's wrapped around trees. It'd be crazy in the middle of one of those things, you know. And it's weird the way it happens in America, you know. That, I mean, there aren't many countries that have, or any other country I think that have those kind of regular tornadoes barreling through. And look at that shipping container. I thought yellow thing,
yeah,
white thing is a shipping container wrapped around a tree.
Right. Stuff's happening elsewhere too.
Yeah, but with the consistency that America has it, you know.
I know. On this thing, France in March, just 3 weeks into it. I saw a report last week.
Yeah, it's on the increase.
Recorded the most lightning strikes for any March. Now it's only 4 decades old. There's consistent monitoring of it, but still, it stood out. You know.
Yeah. There's this, just on the same topic. There's something in here that's kind of poignant. I'll get you to stop it at the point there. It's just the BBC. It's inside of a school as the tornado hit. Just play it there, and I'll let you know when to stop it. Stop there. That I just saw the sign written on a little blackboard on the left there obviously by the staff or teachers. It says, "The dinosaurs didn't read. Look what happened to them."
Yeah, education may not help.
Yeah,
for what's coming. Not state education.
Well,
anyway.
Is it a dinosaur? You know, are humans?
Is that what separates us? Are we going to master nature?
Or the same fate as the dinosaurs, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, it's just kind of crazy in the school at the time, but we'll not bother playing it. Anyway, yeah, that's all I got for this week. Did we miss anything important? I don't think so.
No, although that political headline, this goes back to our opening topic about the geopolitical impact of what's going on with America saying, we're still number one, baby. And Russia and China saying, oh, no, you're not anymore, actually. I'm not sure what it's saying, but it is true that I think Macron and Scholz and the Spanish Prime Minister, immediately after Xi returned from Moscow, put out requests to be invited to Beijing for meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And so Politico noted this. This is Politico EU, but whatever. Politico is pro-US, pro-Western outlet, right? The headline, we can't lose China, EU leaders say.
Mm-hmm.
Subheadline, Xi Jinping's blooming bromance with Vladimir Putin is freaking EU leaders out. Now they're booking flights to Beijing.
Yep.
It's just, for me, again, it goes back to, like, is Kirby serious when he says, "Meh, it's just a fleeting, marriage of convenience"?
Oh, he's deluded.
Like, and similarly in Europe, did they see that and go, I didn't expect that at all. This is very worrying. Well, I'm shocked. I'm going to go to Beijing and make sure that I didn't misinterpret that.
The EU has a lot more. There's a bit of reality in that statement, because, I mean, the EU has a lot more to lose and is in a lot more vulnerable position than the US when it comes to, the breaking up of the current world order and sanctions and the flow of energy and the flow of goods and all that kind of stuff. America, over in Fortress America across the ocean, they've got their own resources, and I suppose they figure they can weather any storms,
right,
a lot better than the EU,
Yeah.
And I get the impression the EU, EU leaders, as delusional as they are, they engage in this kind of rhetoric, anti-Russian, anti-China rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, and they think that's just politics. That's what you do, it's not personal. We just say that kind of stuff, but then they kind of crap their pants and they go, no, when they see China and Russia in particular, but China in particular, kind of starting to take what they're saying seriously. So you belligerent to us, so you don't want to do business anymore, you want to do sanctions, we take you at your word and we respond in kind, and they're like, no, that's not how it works. It's just, we just say stuff. I mean, we got to justify our jobs, right? We got to talk it up and talk like strong man in a crisis and stuff, like, and I got to justify my position, you don't take it seriously, like, we're not going to really do it. And China's like, no, too late, sorry. I already acted on your statements.
Right.
Yeah. Bad Chinese accent. Anyway, we leave it there. We did miss one thing, and it's Scotty's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Mr. Scott, our sound man.
Yay! That's it.
And our key driver.
He's super. He hasn't had enough birthdays to have dampened his spirit, his enthusiasm for birthdays yet. He hasn't.
He can't wait for the show to end because it's birthday time.
It's birthday time, yeah. Anyway, so happy birthday to Scotty, and to all of you, thanks for watching, listening, and commenting. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back next week with another one on whatever crap's been happening between now and then. So, until then, stay safe, and we'll see you later.
See y'all next week.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal now.